Hello, welcome to Global Mission of Peace's Mystic View, number 42. And this will be environmentalism, myth busting. And of course, I'm always joined by my co-host, Shelley. Hello, Shelley.
Hello, and hello, everyone.
So, I think, Shelley, the topic being environmentalism, but I actually want to get into isms and ists.
Appropriate before we jump right in.
Yeah.
We'll set the format.
Yeah, because because those suffixes, and I hope they still teach in school what a suffix and a prefix is.
I think they do.
Those endings of words might not be as benign, or they're certainly descriptive. They're quite descriptive, but what are they describing? And as opposed to another ending, which is IC. Okay, so almost like environmentalistic. So anyway, environmentalism, which is an ism, which is a belief system. An ism is a belief system. It usually has people who create policy that is by the few, few at least in regard to the ratio of those who make up the movement. So it might be 100 people, it might be 1,000 people, but if in that any ism there's millions, then 1,000 people is but a tiny portion of it. So policy, or what is considered to the definition of any ism, is usually composed of by the originators of that ism. And then the ists are both the ones who set the policy, but also the bulk of the people who follow what becomes groupthink. And when you have large portions of people who are ists, very often, even though they're part of groupthink, they are not the originators of the thinking. They're followers of the thinking.
Purveyors of the thinking, perpetuators of the thinking.
Yes, and so we kind of end up with leaders and followers.
And what's really good to look at, as you mentioned, is what was the origin of your belief system? Where did that come from? That's pretty easy to do it. Minimal research and figure that out for yourself, and then decide. Mm-hmm. Is this really coherent and in alignment with who I really feel I am?
Right. Like, in other words, we might say, like, the policy that the Pope sets is really Catholicism. But most people, they'll listen to it, but usually they do a little independent thinking on the doctrine that comes down. So in many ways, most Catholics are actually Catholics and not Catholists. So when we come to environmentalism, and if you're an environmentalist, you might have some thinking to do. So kind of like we want to look and myth bust maybe the environmentalist concepts, which is also
and some of the code words that have been so amply provided to sustain that belief system.
Right.
Or that ism.
Now, there are people who certainly took the environment into account. That's where a lot of the state parks came in, to protect the environment. And again, so, which is great, really, is great. But then I think what really happened was that the globalists and globalism got involved, and started something called environmentalism, and which of course the group think is you are an environmentalist. So when this movement really got started, as far as like a mass movement, a movement of consciousness, the environmental movement, which is environmentalism and environmentalists, the big rallying call might have really got going from the globalists' point of view when Al Gore came out with his, what was it, Inconvenient Truth?
Boy, it turned into a vehicle. Now it's a vehicle.
And so many really well-meaning, good-intentioned people, and this is really where we want to do some of the myth busting. The average person is a good person and wants to do the right thing. But to do the right thing, you have to have good information. Because you have to make this, to do the right thing requires making correct or well-informed, good-hearted decisions. So I really believe many of the environmentalists, based on the information they're given, are in fact doing the right thing based on the information they're given. What we're doing here is questioning that information and its sources.
And its sources. It's no different really than the medical situation that we're in. It's the same thing. We've been provided certain belief systems, certain information, but is it accurate? So bringing it back to environmentalism, now we have a vehicle which carries forward that belief system that then people, out of the kindness of their heart that is natural, we are service to other predominantly. Really shareable God sparks is what we are. And we're just ever so willing to do what we're told is the right thing, but it's really incumbent upon us now, especially now, that we really check out the origin of those belief systems and find out, is it true? Is it still true? Is it relative?
And so as we, like, if we're calling this environmentalism myth busting, in a certain way it might be belief busting. And I want, Chelly and I really want to be clear that if we bust a belief, if anybody's watching and we say some things and it's kind of like, and it seems shocking, it's not, this isn't, we are stating beforehand that we believe anybody with this belief system of saving the environment, which is another thing I believe, all come from the right place. They're actually coming from their hearts, and they're doing what good humans do, is trying to be responsible.
Just like all of our family that went down to Standing Rock. And when I say family, I mean our earth family, our human family, that are all standing behind that. That's an environmental decision that we felt in our gut and in our hearts and knew that was the right thing to do despite what was being purveyed.
So there's actually a little history of the environmental movement since Al Gore came out, and it's first started out with global warming, man-made or anthropogenic global warming, and the demon of this concept was carbon dioxide or CO2. Okay. Now, for some reason, it's no longer called global warming. It's now called climate change. And anybody who looks at a history of the earth knows the climate has changed a lot. And now if somebody, and these days, if somebody is not accepting the science of the published science, the invested science, if you do not believe it, kind of like, I guess, the current elected president of the United States, Donald Trump, the president-elect, has been called a climate denier. Now, I'm quite sure you've heard this term. Have you ever really asked yourself what climate denial actually means? For me, for me to make sense of something like that means if it's cold outside and I say it's warm, I'm denying the climate. If it's raining and I say it's dry, I'm denying the climate. But in the parlance of environmentalism, what is a climate denier? Somebody who denies that we have a climate? I mean, what is a climate denier denying?
Denying observable phenomena.
Okay, so, and of course, this is based on climate change. Now, I know, from my experience in my body, climate has changed. And my experience is that actually it's cooler. That's my experience. I remember really nice, because I happen to like summer, nice, long, hot summers.
With blue skies.
Oh, yeah.
Speaking of observable phenomena.
Yes.
We had lots of blue skies.
Yes, we did. And and we had jets in the days of blue skies leaving their little very rapidly disappearing contrails. We've always had contrails.
But
I don't remember these billowing, persistent, spreading, greasy, sun-obfuscating trails. I don't remember them.
no, I don't think that the contrails ever included such things as aluminum-coated fiberglass or barium or radioactive thorium or cadmium or nickel-desiccated blood, mold, spores. I won't go on, but polymer fibers, there's been plenty of that observed. Observable phenomena that's being denied by the people who want to provide a more convenient truth.
Yes, I never ever remember seeing trails that either ran parallel, crisscrossed each other, and formed persistent cloud patterns based on contrails in the sky.
Well, and here's the thing that confuses people. They'll look up and they'll see something beautiful. It looks like a rainbow. Have you ever looked at a splotch of oil on the ground and seen all those lovely colors? Okay, so many people are confused now. They think they're seeing a sundog or a moondog, but what they're seeing, all these beautiful rainbows in the sky, guess what, folks? A lot of that is the result of chemtrail.
So, but I remember being at a place when I worked at Omega, one of the premier holistic institutes in the world, and being with somebody looking up, and I was quite upset to see that nasty crap being put up in the sky. So I turned to somebody next to me. I said, don't those chemtrails bother you? And he says, I don't think I believe in it. I said,
No.
You don't believe what you're seeing? So he said, well, those are contrails, because that's what they're told by our trusted news media and other outlets of people who want to go, what is that? Oh, just contrails. And of course, contrails are as natural as when you go out, it's cold up there. And there's water vapor in that hot jet fuel. And so a contrail is quite natural, like when you go outside on a cold day, and when you exhale, you see a trail come out of your mouth. And it disappears rather rapidly because it's a lot drier down here, and we don't put out as much water vapor as a jet engine does. But imagine walking down the street on a cold day breathing and turning behind yourself. Say you walked a block, and then you turn behind, and there's your whole breath trail behind you. Wouldn't you think that was odd?
Or some serious methane. Come on, our CO2 is.
I mean, wouldn't a persistent trail that after you exhale and just hung in the air and spread out, wouldn't you go, That's really weird.
Oh,
For those of us who grew up when there were only contrails and we look up in the sky and see those things, we go, that's really weird.
right. Yeah. And I do have to say, I feel for the people suffering with the cognitive dissonance, because that is a very real and traumatic event to process in your body. And you have to come to terms with the fact that you've been lied to. And what kind of a society are we? Come on, it's Christmas. You know what? Oh, I feel bad. I'm sorry to say, even for all the people who were taught that Santa Claus was the guy bringing them love and presents, and then one day there's a cognitive dissonance that affects the human body, and it's shocking and it's traumatic, and we really need to stop with the environmental denial, which is where we started with this conversation.
And we're now returning to it. So with climate change, which was originally global warming. So even though the name has changed, everybody is still thinking global warming, because CO2 that's being blamed as the culprit has never been accused of lowering the temperature. So any alarm about CO2 and its need to be mitigated, but actually more importantly taxed, to me, climate change is a weasel word. They already planted global warming. They put it to climate change because this way here, I guess maybe they can't be sued. And but the people who, in their heart of hearts and in their good intentions, that still think we must do something and we will tolerate a global tax if it'll only help climate change. The alarm is basically the seas are going to rise, which could only happen from global warming, which they don't call it anymore. So the fear is left, the fear of global warming is left, but they've changed it to climate change because this way here, they can't really be called on it. We're just saying climate's changing. The fact that you think it's warming is only because we planted that seed in there years ago and you're still working with it.
Yeah, that's right. And out of the goodness of their hearts, people look out and they see their beautiful earth and they want to do whatever it takes to protect her. And that's very honorable, but that's not based on correct information. That's based on your response from your heart. But what really happened back in 2004, I believe, is when the new code word switched to climate change as opposed to global warming. The earth was rocked by this cosmic blast on a scale that was absolutely impossible to even exaggerate. And that brings us to kind of the cosmic story behind the switch over to climate change as opposed to global warming. Because something so big and so undeniable was now the observable phenomena. And although, okay, so what we're talking about is a supernova. And the debris from a supernova is called a magnetron. So that was not visible by normal perception in 2004 when it happened. It was predicted that we would begin seeing it. So in the higher kind of beyond X-ray, it is detectable. And certainly all the astrophysicists and science labs around the world certainly detected it and knew about it and wrote about it. And I've got numerous articles from 2004 all talking about this. But the really fun thing, how it ties in here, is that same light that affected our magnetosphere around the earth that protects us is going to be visible again December 27th, 2016. That's just in a few days. So Obama had spoken to his cabinet to say, be prepared for, what did he call it? Space weather. The preparation of satellites potentially going down and so on, and making this big announcement about space weather. So as it pertains to global warming switching their code word to now be climate change, I think that has some bearing on it. It's pretty cool story because that's a cosmic kundalini that has happened in the heavens, in our universe. This has already happened, and what do we know? As above, so below. It's happening now in the physical form, which is what we are. And so people are having these experiences of waking up. That's a kundalini rising. That's our pineal about to be activated. Or in degrees, being activated degrees.
So mark it on your calendar.
Well, it's been an open window. We've all been feeling it.
Yes. Well, again, with me and my sense of humor.
Yes.
So if you know what archons are and your pineal gland opens, you might be able to see them for New Year's. So we're going to take a quick break here because we have our production team that sometimes likes to put things in here. And we're to come back and continue and really kind of close this conversation and hopefully help anybody who, because they care, we would like to demonstrate where we think in our heart of hearts that you have been misled.
Little myth busting for you.
Little myth busting. Be right back.
We are Global Mission of Peace.
United by love,
peace, and understanding.
Together.
Together, we are making a difference.
Okay, we're back. And now we're going to get into some visuals. And the myth we're really trying to bust is there's two things. One, that whatever the climate change, especially with regards to global warming, is man-made, and that the demon of this climate change is carbon dioxide, which plants thrive in. So let me first, I'm going to bring up a chart of temperatures over the last 10,000 years based on ice core samples. So I'm quite sure it's on the screen. Shelley, you have a slower connection. Do you see it?
I do.
All right. So on the extreme right of this chart, down here, and as you can see, there's kind of a midline here. But at the extreme right, at where this black line is where our current temperature is. Now, the little ice age started around 700 years ago. That's where you see these blue lines there. All right. So around 600 years ago, the temperature plummeted from the medieval warming period, which was, around almost 1,000 years ago. The medieval warming period is when the Renaissance happened, after coming out of this other little dip, which was when we had the Dark Ages, because it was too freaking cold to come out of your house. So anyway, on the extreme right here, and we can see from the little ice age, our temperature has risen. But let us take a historical perspective before the evil CO2 of man-made burning of fossil fuels occurred. So if you look at the medieval warming period, it's a lot warmer than when we are now. Okay, you can see these are like, I'm not sure what these are degrees Celsius, but from there to here is a full Celsius degree difference from where we are now from where we were in the medieval warming period. The medieval warming period was a full degree Celsius warmer. All right. Now, if we go back to the Roman period, and the Roman period is like, let's just, the highest peak is around 2,000 years ago. All right. So historically, about the time of Jesus. And we see there, this is a full 2 degrees centigrade warmer, a full 2 degrees, okay? Which, according to what they've put out, would be quite catastrophic. And then if we go back, let's see, it's because it's a little small. That's why I'm reading it for you. During what's known as the Minoan warming, and Minoan was a culture that was on the Isle of Crete, which is a little bit south in the Mediterranean from Greece, and that would be about 3,500 years ago. All right, and as you can see here, now that looks to me like a full 3.5 degrees Celsius warmer. Okay, so here we are, over here at the full right is where we currently are. As we can see, we have certainly warmed up from the little ice age. Thank God. All right, but if we get back to medieval warming period, during the Renaissance, people weren't driving cars. If we go back to Roman period, people weren't driving cars. And we go back to Minoan warming, well, people weren't driving cars. So the whole idea that the reason that we are mercifully climbing out of the little ice age is man-made based on this of our history seems to be bad science. Now, the good science is that temperatures on the planet are very much affected by sunspots. And when they go back and do sunspot history, they find out that during this little ice age was a sunspot minimum. We have currently entered a sunspot minimum. How long it'll persist, we don't know, but it might be why I don't find summers as warm as I used to. And I don't like that. I mean, already here I'm in Virginia. We've already had 18 degrees before winter has begun. This is not normal weather. We're getting ready for another Arctic blast. This is not normal. Okay, and they even have new things, this new polar vortex, and more we've been hearing these things. So what are we doing? What are we trying to do here? Well, basically it is that the boogeyman is supposedly CO2. Responsible people who are being told it's CO2, who care about the environment, who care about the earth, believe it because they're told by people they're supposed to believe. The scientists who sign on that are allowed to publish papers and allowed to come and speak on the media. Well, who we don't hear from are the scientists who disagree, who number in the tens of thousands. We're not allowed to hear from them. That's because the ists, and this would be the globalists, really, of which the environmentalism is a subset of globalism, don't want them to be heard because they want to tax people for natural output of having electricity, staying warm, and getting from point A to point B in their car. Now, please understand, we're not talking about the pollution that comes out of a tailpipe of burning fossil fuels. Pollution can be mitigated. Coal plants can actually be, between modern technologies of burning coal and the scrubbers that can be put on them, they can actually, that smoke emission can be clean, that the only output is CO2. But if you're into the ism of all of this, CO2, climate change. All right, so you can see the alarmism that is promoted by poor science. And the whole reason is people, the globalists, want to make money off us living a modern life. And tell us that the world's gonna end, or we're all gonna bake and die, and the seas are gonna come up and swallow us. Okay, look at these periods beforehand. Okay, the world didn't go away. The world didn't get all gulfed up. Nobody burned out. Matter of fact, these were really good times for agriculture. So I'm just gonna close this now because I think you've all seen it. I think I've made my point with the whole concept of global warming, which is now the hidden meme in climate change, and CO2, the big scary gas.
Well, and we all know that fear is very useful to those you mentioned earlier. You know, that's also another source of food for them. So kind of behooves us to check who we're giving our energy to and at what cost.
Now, we certainly wouldn't. Now, so there are places, Lord Monckton, Moncton, he has done he's done the science. He's gone down, crunched the numbers, put his name in a YouTube thing, and look and see his presentations. First of all, he's a delightful man. He's got kind of hyperthyroid eyes, makes him look like a little Boston Bull Terrier, and but he's humorous, but he also brings you good science. Now, and he's also, and what he does is he tells how many millions of people, it's roughly about 2 million people a year, die from lack of electricity that could be easily provided by coal plants. But what he also does is allow us to know that we're not talking about going back to the days of dirty, horrible, smoke belching coal plants that put out lots of particulate matter that created lung disease, breathing problems, black, this nasty soot everywhere. That's pollution. And that's particulate matter. That's not CO2 that's hurting your lungs. That's not CO2 that turned everything grimy and black. That was it was the particulate matter. And again, we now have modern ways of burning it and capturing all that so that the only emission is CO2. So can you imagine being able to save 2 million lives a year because people now who are currently denied electricity because of climate change could have it and could live a somewhat more modern life like Shelley and I live, and I'm quite sure anybody who is watching this video lives. So it really behooves us, because we want to do the right thing. We do, and the whole reason why there is even an environmentalist movement is based on people doing the right thing about wrong information. The information is incorrect. It's basically those who will promote this, who give up the science, crunch the numbers, and Lord Monckton allows to show how they play with models to get the numbers they want. I mean, really, many modern researchers basically they sell their services. They tell people, tell us what you need to prove so we can set up the experiment to give you the data you need. I mean, right now, science is much more of a business than a passion. Unfortunately, the globalists have also created a new passion: money. So this is a very involved story, but the point that Shelley and I are trying to make, the myth we're trying to bust, is that whatever climate is changing, it has little to do with man and CO2. And if any CO2 is helping a little bit with global warming, as you see, we just came out of a little ice age. And I think nobody wants to return to that. But it gets kind of hard to believe that actually our modern CO2 output is responsible, because when we look historically, it was much warmer. And we didn't have millions of cars on the road belching out evil CO2. No, we have millions of cars on the road belching out horrible particulate and carbon monoxide. I mean, we're not getting away from the fact that the internal combustion engine as currently configured is a dirty engine, but it's not about CO2. So there is pollution. We do want to stop pollution. We want clean air. We want clean water, but none of them have anything to do with CO2. Taxing CO2 is a crime against you. And so I think that you might want to be empowered and stop being led around by the nose by fake science and somebody who wants nothing more than to reach into your pocket. Because the way it works is, yes, they will tax the companies, and then the companies will go, okay, it costs us 5 cents more now to provide whatever for you, so we'll charge them 10 cents because we have to make a profit. And now again, I'm not against capitalism. I'm not against the profit motive either. But do we want somebody pulling more money out of our pocket out of a fable, a myth? Shelley.
Well, and a useless myth, because we have not needed this type of transportation or energy system at all. This thing should have been obsolete 50 years ago. What we have available to us far supersedes any need to continue creating oil spills everywhere and the pollution that we're all led to believe that we're helping by paying our tax on CO2, our carbon taxes. And there's just so much that each of us can do if we could just check in with our own truth in our own bodies, because our bodies do reflect what's going on in the bigger picture. So you can change what's going on in your immediate life by finding out what's actually the truth. Where does that register in you? I think that's what's going to be most useful, especially with the light that's coming to the planet now. It does require that you have the ability to find that place in yourself to raise your own energy, that you can activate your own pineal gland. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, then it's really going to be important that you begin to investigate some meditation, or investigate how you find out what your own truth is. I do feel like this is a very important message to share.
And this also helps us, I think, for unity. Because what gets done by the global controllers, also known as the globalists, is that they will put out something, and then, there are some people who, I've studied science, all right? So not everybody is, some people have liberal arts. Science is not their strength. They have other strengths. So there are people out there who can actually look at things, and the web allows us to investigate these science. Now, for a lot of people, investigating science is just not something they're interested in. They would rather watch a cat video, and that's perfectly okay. That's perfectly okay. But what it does is that there are those who, through their completely good-natured trust of people they should be able to trust, but are being lied to. Now there creates a division where people who in their goodness believe a myth come at odds with people like myself and might call me a climate denier. There are certain people who, the new president-elect, they might be fine with a lot of things, but he's a climate denier. So you start to see the insidiousness of this myth, which is in many ways a poison, as toxic as many of the other poisons being put into our water. Some of those toxins coming through pipelines that always seem to leak. Talking about Standing Rock.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a point that occurred to me while you were speaking, Shelley, that I wish I could recall, because it was a good point, and I should have got my pen out and done it, but I didn't do due diligence. But I really, this really is about unity. When we are not being divided by lies, myths, out and out lies, myths. And you know something? Since myths are actually important, we're calling it myth busting, but it's really lie busting, because myths usually contain some truth. These myths do not.
Right.
So anyway, we need to come together. We do have a planet that is getting horribly polluted. Nestle's would love all the water to be polluted because they'd like to sell us water that they don't think we have a right to.
Oh, and they'd like to milk us for a little bit more fear as well, because that kind of serves them as well.
Well, fear serves anybody who wants you to not be able to think clearly, because fear produces adrenaline. Adrenaline reduces the amount of blood that goes to our brain. When our brain is denied of the proper amount of blood, cognition is diminished. So now you can see why there's so much fear mongering, because they really don't want people to be too sharp. Because then if you're sharp, you might really listen with the intelligence that God gave us, and you might go, oh, really?
Might be a little discernment.
I mean, seriously? I mean, you might actually watch your favorite news channel so that you can be, told about erectile dysfunction and every other drug problem. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed how many drug commercials are on these days, because they're the only ones who can afford it, because they make so many billions of dollars keeping you in ill health with their bad drugs. But that's another discussion.
Oh, that's a whole nother show. Hey, next week we'll do that one.
So our whole purpose of this is to really bring some enlightenment, because this is an issue that divides people. So it's not just like we're trying to, enlighten you. It's by removing this lie, we can find more common ground. We're not going to have this divide between those of us who kind of really understand what is being sold here and the rest of the people who very good-heartedly believe what they think people they should be able to trust but can't are telling them.
Mm-hmm. And really to remind us, or to reclaim the fact that we are one.
We are.
It's the observer effect. When we begin to see that, we find evidence of it everywhere. And then we have a fast track into the light and into becoming lighter and more discerning.
So I hope it's really clear, if there is anybody who's watching this video who has believed in what Al Gore started and has been promoted, please know this was out of love. This wasn't wanting to rain on your parade. This wasn't on we're not trying to make anybody wrong. The people who are wrong are the ones who gave you the bad information. They're wrong. So let's, please, this was done with great love, great respect for who you are. The people who really think that there's an environmental crisis rather than a pollution crisis, which is, of course, an environmental crisis, but we're talking about the whole CO2 thing. That this was really done out of love, and we understand anybody who has believed it did it because they love the earth too.
Well, they love the earth and they love the cosmos, and there's so much more that we're connected to that we have been diverted from. But prepare and really enjoy all the light from that's arriving from that magnetar I spoke of earlier. Embrace it. It's beautiful.
So I think it's time for us to say goodbye. And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching Mystic View. Good. See you later, Shelley.
Yeah, later. Good night. We'll see you next week.
And God bless you all. Let us come together in unity.